Hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I've been making videos on this channel for 10 years talking about books and disability and lots of other things. A few months ago I had a baby, so I have been uploading fewer videos than usual, but I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about my reading year so far. I'm particularly excited because as I have been making less content, there are some books that we haven't talked about yet, so we can get into that. I really enjoy watching people do is it called the mid-year bookish freakout tag? I've done that myself before in the past, but I decided this year instead of doing that, I would take to Instagram and asked if you had any specific questions you wanted to ask me about my reading year, which means we can get into a more bespoke territory and I have more questions to answer, and I thought that would be fun. So let us dive into that. Initially, let's talk stats. Normally, I have lots of really interesting stats to share. I do not have that this year. That will please some of you and displease some of you, because I know some people are really into that stuff and some people couldn't care less. Normally, I'm really into that stuff, but it's just fallen by the wayside this year. So normally I have a spreadsheet that I've created myself where I can catalogue the stuff that I particularly care about. Like, I want to know how many books in translation I'm reading. I want to know what publishers I'm reading from. I want to know, how many own voices disability books I've been reading and how many countries I've been reading from. I really like reflecting on that data, and I did start a new spreadsheet this year, but I didn't keep up with it, and now it's been so long that quite frankly I can't be bothered. So I don't have extensive stats. I have the bare bones for you. In 2024, I have so far read 51 books. That sounds more impressive than it is given circumstances, because I review books for my job, and a big chunk of that is reviewing picture books and children's books in general for an organisation called Inclusive Books for Children, who I love. I will link them in the description box down below. So if you remove those books, which obviously are much shorter, I have read 23 full-length books this year, and I have DNF'd 3 books, which is separate to those 23, which is a smaller number, DNFing only 3. And those books total 8,000 pages. 14% of my reading has been audiobook so far this year. It's actually a greater percentage than that, because if you took out all the picture books and children's books, which are all in physical form, and looked at what I'm reading for pleasure and other work, I think post-baby it's 90%. 90% of the stuff I've been reading has been in audiobook form, but we'll talk about that a little more because that was one of the questions that you sent to me. So those are the only stats I have for you, but I think that that's enough, quite frankly. Right, I have written down your questions. I have some books to hold up and show you. If I haven't pulled a book off the shelf, I will insert the cover here instead. Let us dive into the questions in no particular order. You asked me, who is your favourite character that you have been introduced to in 2024? Sorry, I have nothing. You may be able to hear our daughter in the background. I hope that you can't just for the audio, because it's quite screechy. She has entered what we call I think what everyone calls the pterodactyl stage, where they realise they can make high-pitched noises, which she makes when she is excited. So yes, if you can hear that in the background, I'm sorry. It's cute. Also, loud. So right, okay. Favorite character you have been introduced to in 2024. I thought about this, and the thing is that with the type of books that I read, there are loads of dislikable characters. I love a dislikable character, which I guess means that I can recommend a dislikable character to you, but I also think favourite character would imply someone that you want to maybe hang out with. I can't think of a character that I've read, at the top of my head, that I really want to be friends with, but a character that really surprised me, I think, in my reading this year was Lu Fang in River East, River West by Aubrey Lescure, which was my favourite from this year's Women's Prize shortlist. I will link the reading vlog that I did where I talked about all of the Women's Prize shortlist. And I think I was really surprised by liking his character, because I really didn't enjoy him to begin with. I didn't like reading about him. It was a split narrative where we were reading from his perspective and then also his stepdaughter's, and I much preferred reading about his stepdaughter. I wanted to be with her all the time. I felt exasperated when we went back to Lu Fang. It was just, I don't know, not a narrative I was particularly drawn to. And I think what was quite charming about the book is that the way I felt about Lu Fang as a reader is the way that his stepdaughter ended up feeling about him. It's a book that's set in, I think, 2007 in Shanghai, and we're following Alva, who's really annoyed that her mum has married their rich landlord, Lu Fang. And we follow his perspective in the 80s, I think. And Alva, as I said, is unimpressed that her mum has married this man. But the more time she spends with him, she really warms to him, and that is also how I ended up feeling about him in this book too. And I think that was probably deliberate, the way that it was written, and I thought that was really effective. So he is probably the character that I think of the most fondly, because I feel like I wasn't nice to him at the beginning, you know? Next question, what 2024 book would you recommend to someone in a reading slump? So these are books that came out in 2024. These are books that I just read in 2024. I've also tried to answer with different books for each question, just so that we're talking about lots of different things. So there are many that I could recommend for this question, but fast-paced ones I would recommend for reading slumps. I also made a video with how to get out of a reading slump a while ago. I'll link that down below. I would perhaps recommend Chucky by John Wyndham, which is a science fiction novel from the 60s about a boy who is possessed, possibly, maybe. And I would also recommend Suspension of Mercy by Patricia Highsmith, which is an old school crime thriller book about a husband who's an author who writes about what it would be like to kill his wife, and then his wife disappears. So the police think that he must have killed her. You're reading from his perspective, and none of the people in that book are likable at all, and I just found it really good fun, as are, to be honest, most of her books. What is a book that made you feel calmer? Two of the books that I read for reviewing for Inclusive Books for Children made me feel super calm. One of them is one I would have read anyway because it's disclosure, by a friend of mine, Lucy Catchpole, and it's called Mama Car. It's illustrated by Karen George. Lucy and James are the folk behind the What Happened to You and You're So Amazing picture books. And it's a picture book about how her wheelchair is a safe space for her child. And it's just so lovely, you know, as in they can travel together to the kitchen to make a cup of tea, and then they can travel back to bed and be in bed and having a picnic, or they can go out to the park. And if she hurts herself falling over, she can clamber onto the wheelchair and have a hug. And it's just lovely. I loved it so much. And then I also read a book called The Marriage List. Is it called? No, Ellie and the Marriage List, which is a middle grade book about two friends who are kind of perplexed by their older siblings, and they want to save a tree in Ellie's garden that has a tree house in it. And it's just, I don't know, there's nothing huge going on in the book, but it just made me feel really warm and cozy and reminded me of the books that I would get out from the library again and again when I was a kid, like My Best Fiend by Sheila Lavelle. And the main character also has Down syndrome, so we've got disability representation in there as well. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed that one. Flip side, what is a book that irritated the hell out of you? Was a question. And I think I have to say Cut to the Bone by Alex Kahn. Earlier in the year, I did a trying to find a new favourite crime thriller reading vlog. And I think I was quite kind about this book at the time. And just, you know, you have those books that upon reflection, just know, just know. And you were kind of swept up a little bit in them in the moment. And you can have more objectivity, I think, when you're looking back. And I really wanted to like this book because it was a crime book about a vlogger who goes missing, and I thought that would be really fun, or could potentially be really fun. But I read the book and I gave up on it. I can't remember how far through I was, like a half to 2/3 of the way through. I think I skimmed to the end to find out who had done the thing, and I was also right, which annoyed me even more because I'd guessed it at the very beginning. And you want to be able to guess, but not that quickly. The thing was that this was a novel written by someone who didn't really understand social media, or at least that's how I felt, because it was about a YouTuber, and it was just very sensationalist and a bit silly, I think. So that, yes, did irritate the life out of me by the end. So that's the one I will say. A book that came at the right time, otherwise you wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. I think I have to say Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. I would have really enjoyed this book anyway, but I read this 2.5 months postpartum, and it's about a young mother who is talking about the early months and years of motherhood and how difficult it is. And she writes about it in this unflinching way that kind of ate my skin, I think is how I described it in the Women's Prize reading vlog, because it was shortlisted this year. I listened to the audiobook of that, and it was so weird having this voice talking to me at 3 in the morning while I'm holding a baby. And it was a bit weird. I'm not sure I would particularly recommend the experience of it, as in reading it at 2.5 months postpartum. In fact, when I said I was reading it, I did have messages from many of you saying, are you sure that this is wise? Like saying I read it, and my kids are in their 20s and I still found it very difficult. So yeah, it was a bizarre experience, and I will never forget the time and the place that I read that book, but definitely had a huge impression on me because of the time and place that I read it. A brilliant book regardless, as I said, but yeah, it got me. Next, has anything changed with what you like to read now that you're a mum? I think I just have less patience for things that I'm not enjoying, though I did say I've only DNF'd 3 books this year, so that would indicate that I am, I guess, reading books that I have been enjoying, which is great. But yeah, I definitely do have, I just don't have time anymore to be spending time with books that are not fulfilling something, like either making me happy or making me think. I mean, obviously, if I'm reading books for work, I have to finish them anyway. But outside of that, no. If I'm going to definitely have a strict cutoff, I think, for books that are not doing the things that I would like them to be doing. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, probably the biggest change for me is just more audiobooks, which fits into another question, which is, what is your new reading routine? I wouldn't say that I have a reading routine. I wouldn't say I had one previously either. I think I was just reading books whenever I could. It wasn't as if I always read an hour before bed or something like that. But now it is a case of just slotting them in wherever, which is why audiobooks are so great, because I can have headphones on if I am, as I said, doing night feeds, or during the day, during nap times. If I need to have my hands free, I need to be washing bottles and breast pumps and sterilizing stuff, or just cleaning up after myself and everything. So if I can be listening to something at the same time, that's great. I don't have the time to sit down with a book and not do anything else at the same time, or if I do, it's nighttime and dark. So that is tricky without waking other people. So I would describe my new routine as chaotic and opportunistic. Have you done any rereads this year? I have done, I've done one, and I'm about to do another one. So over on Patreon this year, we have a book club, and I will link Patreon in the description box down below if you would like to join. Support over there means I can keep creating free content for all of you, and it funds my time, taking the time to make them accessible by creating captions and all of that good stuff. So the book club over on Patreon this year has a very specific goal, in that we are rereading favourite books of mine, or what I think are favourite books of mine, what were favourite books once upon a time, and seeing if that's still the case. So every season I am popping up a post where people can vote on a couple of books, and then whichever one wins is the one that we end up reading. And then I make several videos. It used to be one, but I'm actually enjoying making videos as I'm reading, updating little snippets, and then if you've read that far into the book, you can read it without getting spoiled. The first book that you voted for was The Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber, which was a book I read for the first time 10 years ago. So I reread that, and that was a weird one to listen to. That was the first book that I read after giving birth. And because it's set in space, it has this timelessness feel to it, and almost has this anti-gravity, discombobulating tone, and that definitely aligned with my life. Not that I was in space, but I definitely felt discombobulated. So I really enjoyed reading that one and revisiting it, and it just added a new layer to it reading it at that time. And the book that I'm going to be rereading now, not right this second, in the next few days, is Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter, which again, I think I read for the first time 10 years ago. I reread once, I think, before chatting with Max for a podcast, and then I kind of reread it in inverted commas because I saw a theatre production of it, which was a one-man show with Cillian Murphy, who was amazing. He played, obviously, everybody, not the kids, but he played the dad and Crow and just switched between those two voices. He had, I think it was a hood that he would put on if he was being Crow, and then he wouldn't have that on if he was being the dad. One of those performances where you just wonder how the actor is doing that every night, because it was such a physically and emotionally demanding thing to be doing. So I haven't read it in physical form in about 9 years, and I think I saw the production of it in 2019, I think. So it's been a while, and I'm sure I will still absolutely love it, and I'm excited to read it, though it is about the death of a mum, so I think that is also going to be a weird one to read at this point in my life too. Favourite new to you author? There are many that I could choose, because actually I was looking at the list of books that I have read this year. I haven't gone back to many authors that I've read from before, and I'm going to say my favourite new to me author is maybe Isabella Hamad, who wrote Enter Ghost, which again was one of the Women's Prize shortlisted books, so I talked about that one recently. It's set in Palestine, and it is about a group of people who are putting on a production of Hamlet. And I was just very impressed by the writing, and I am very excited to see whatever she does next. Most anticipated book of the second half of the year. I think, like to do a whole video about this. I did a most anticipated books for the first half of the year in December last year, and books that are coming out off the top of my head in the second half of the year that I'm excited about. We've got a new book by Ali Smith that was coming out this summer, I think has been pushed to November time. It's called Glyph. I don't really know anything about it. Don't care. I'm going to be reading it because it's Ali Smith. Evie Wilde has a new book coming out on the 1st of August. She's the author of The Bass Rock and After the Fire, A Still Small Voice. I always get that title wrong because it's a long title. She's had, I want to say, 4 books out previously, and I've read all of them. Her new book, I think, has a ghostly element to it. Then we have a new book from Jacqueline Wilson coming out in September, which is a follow-on to her Girls series that I worshipped when I was a young teen. I loved Ellie and Magna and Nadine, and she's writing about them for an adult audience, them in their late 30s, early 40s. This I could absolutely adore, or I could detest. I will report back when I read it. I am scared, but also excited. We have been let down before with books that are like this, not by Jacqueline Wilson, but by other people. So I am trying to rein in my excitement, but I definitely squealed when I heard about this book. I squealed quite loudly. Oh, and we've also got a new book by Sarah Moss that is coming out in the autumn, which is a nonfiction book. And I have loved her, well, all of her books, especially her nonfiction book, Names for the Sea, which is about her time spent in Iceland. This one is very different to that, but I'm very much looking forward to it. If you had all the time in the world, what 5 books would you read right now? This is a fun question, and I did this before sitting down to film because I wanted to have everything to hand. So I whizzed around my shelves and just looked and picked out ones that immediately called to me. So if I had all the time in the world, if I wasn't looking after a young baby, I would read these 5 books. At least these are the ones I would pick. Today, I would pick a John Wyndham. This is Stowaway to Mars, and it's about, I think, a woman who stows away on a spaceship that's going to Mars with one other person, and she may endanger the whole mission. I would also choose to read Bliss Montage by Ling Ma. I am just endlessly amused by how big this book is and how floppy. This I chose because I've had my eye on it again since listening to Sana's podcast episode about Severance by Ling Ma. If you haven't listened to Sana's new podcast, it's so good. I'll link it down below. It's called the End of the World Book Club podcast, and she's talking about apocalyptic dystopian fiction, and Severance is obviously a great example of that. I've read that and really enjoyed it. One of those books that grew on me, actually. I think about it often. This is her collection of short stories, and I think it is supposed to be very weird, and I'm all for weird short stories, so I would very much like to read that. I grabbed this off the shelf, which is a book that's coming out this summer, if it's not already out now. 6th of June, so it is out now. This is called hard copy by Ben Feldman, and it's translated from the Dutch by Hester Velmans. It's about a woman who becomes obsessed with a printer at work and feels like she's in a relationship with the printer. I'm hoping it's going to be a bit like The Woman in the Purple Skirt or There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. I also picked up this, which I guess I wouldn't pick up if I didn't have a young baby to look after, but I really do want to read this one soon. It's a collection of essays called We've Got This, Essays by Disabled Parents, and it's edited by Eliza Hull. I would like to read this for obvious reasons. And then the final one that I picked up off the shelf when I was whizzing around, it was like doing supermarket sweep with my own bookshelves, and it was quite exciting actually. It's called How We Met. That's what my life is like right now. Yeah, this was exciting to me. I was excited, okay? How We Met, a memoir of love and other misadventures by Huma Qureshi. I have read and loved both her short story collection and her debut novel. This is her only non-fiction book, and I would really love to read this one too. What is your most read genre? Literary fiction, whatever that happens to mean. I think I've read quite a lot of crime this year as well, and I've also obviously read a lot of children's books too. What is a book that you bought because you gave in to the internet hype? I wouldn't say that this is particularly internet hype, but it is something that I heard about online, and it was on Ariel and Raylene's podcast, which is called Books Unbound. Again, I will link that down below. But they really loved The Hole by Hiroka Yamada, which is translated from the Japanese by David Boyd. I accepted a review copy of this because it's currently being reissued, I want to say by Granta. Yes, by Granta. And I've had a real hit and miss relationship with her books before. I really didn't like The Factory, and I really did like Weasels in the Attic. So because Ariel, I think it was Ariel, gave it a glowing review, and I had enjoyed Weasels in the Attic too, I thought I would give her another go. This says, when Ace's husband is offered a new job away from the city, the couple ends up relocating, and since his new office is very close to his family's home, it makes sense to move in next door to his parents. Through the long hot summer, Asa does her best to adjust to their new rural lives, to the constant presence of her in-laws, to the emptiness of her existence and the incessant buzz of cicadas. Then one day, while running an errand for her mother-in-law, she comes across a strange creature, follows it to the embankment of a river, and ends up falling into a hole that seems to have been made specifically for her. So obviously Alice in Wonderland vibes from that. How many books have you DNF'd this year? I have DNF'd 3. I DNF'd one of the Women's Prize shortlisted books, which was Restless Dolly Maunder, and I have DNF'd 2 other books, which I'm going to be speaking about in the reading vlog that I'm currently filming, so I won't talk about them here. You will hear about those soon. Someone else asked, are there any books you haven't talked about on the channel yet that you have read? Yes, there are a couple which are answers to future questions, so I won't talk about those here, but I don't think I got round to reviewing Dee Dee's Umbrella by Hwang Jung-yun, which is translated from the Korean by Emily Ye-won. This is 2 stories about non-binary characters living in Korea. It's also about capitalism, and it really reminded me of both of their previous books, as if those 2 had just come together and, you know, had been smushed together into one. Their previous books were called 100 Shadows, which was a bit like Human Acts by Han Kang, was about technology and people creating cheap electronics, and a novel called I'll Go On, which was about queer family and found family. I really enjoyed I'll Go On in particular, but this was really thought-provoking. Not one of my favourite books of the year, but I liked all the themes that it was investigating. It was quite hypnotic. Next question was, what is the best audiobook that you have listened to? And there are so many great books that I have listened to this year, but I thought I would mention one where it wasn't my favourite book. And this is one of the books I haven't actually spoken about yet. Where is it? It's here. It wasn't one of my favourite books, at all, really. But I had a great time listening to it, and the audiobook narrator was brilliant. So that is The Dream Home by T.M. Logan. I read his book The Curfew last year and really loved it. Then I read a few of his backlist books and enjoyed them, but I didn't love them as much as The Curfew. This is his most recent, and I was gutted that I hadn't listened to the audiobook of The Curfew, because after I finished reading it, I found out that Richard Armitage narrated the audiobook, and I love audiobook that he narrates, though he also narrated David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and even he could not make me love Charles Dickens. But I saw that he had narrated the audiobook for The Dream Home as well, so I thought I would listen to it. And yes, it wasn't, as I said, the best crime thriller book that I have ever read, but the narration was just a joy. It was a joy. So overall, the listening experience was a fun one. It's a novel about a family who move into a home and they find this secret room in the house that has some suspicious things in it, and then they start to try and work out where those things came from, and it gets them into a lot of trouble. Someone asked this, which I thought was quite interesting: which book was not for you now but you'd like to go back to it in the future? I thought I would mention this, which is A Sign of Her Own by Sarah Marsh, which is about a woman called Ellen Lark. It's historical fiction. It's about the invention of the telephone, but it's about Ellen, who is deaf and was exploited by the inventor of the telephone. And I was enjoying this when I started reading it, but quite honestly, I started reading it right towards the end of my pregnancy. And I look at some of the books that I either just started reading or thought about reading at that time. Even some of the books I read and finished, I don't remember a whole lot about them, more so than early stages of motherhood. The end of pregnancy was quite difficult, and I look back on those books and also the videos that I filmed at that time and just think, were you okay? Were you all right? Because I don't recognize myself in those videos, and that time is just such a blur in my memory. So this book, I did not give it the attention that it deserved, and I would like to go back to it at some point. So this actually isn't a DNF. I suppose it is a DNF technically, but it's not a book that I DNF'd forever. It's literally just a book that I thought I need to read that another time, and for some reason that's a different category in my head, so it's gone back on the shelf and I will pick it up again at some point in the future. Someone said a 2024, why did I say that so weird? A 2024 release that you were interested in, but for some reason you are no longer interested in it. So I guess there isn't one which I thought, oh, I really want to read that, and then it got bad reviews and I have removed it from my list. I actually am talking about most anticipated books in my next reading vlog, because I'm reading some of those books. But to answer this question, which is maybe not the kind of answer you wanted, but it's just the answer I have and the truth, the book that I'm probably not going to pick up is what's it called? It's called Wafers by Seong Nun Ha. Couldn't read my own writing. It looks like this, and I still really want to read this book, but I'm not going to buy it because I still have her short story collection, Bluebeard's Wife, on my shelf, which I should read soon. It's a Korean book in translation, collection of short stories. A lot of her work is folktale inspired. I really enjoyed her collection, Flowers of Mold. So I am still looking forward to it, but it's not a book that I'm going to be picking up. Probably not the answer you wanted, but it's the only one that I have. Final few questions. Ratio of books that you have bought to books that you have read. So I have read 51 books and I have hauled 34 books. What would you most like to see adapted into a film? There are many, and I think a lot of the Women's Prize shortlisted ones I could choose here for this answer, but the one I want to pick is Christiane Ritter's book, A Woman in the Polar Night, which is a memoir from the 1930s about her traveling to the Arctic Circle with her husband, and I can just see it, the starkness, just everything white. I think it would look really haunting and also beautiful on film. They were in the middle of absolute nowhere. I think in one of the letters her husband sent to her before she travelled to join him, he was celebrating the fact that their neighbour was only 60 miles away over the snow. It takes ages to get there. I just think it would make a really wonderful indie film. And the last question was, what is the best short book you have read so far this year? And I think it's this one, though I haven't checked page counts. I guess there was all the children's books that I've read. If we exclude those, the best short book that I have read this year is Foster by Claire Keegan. This is a book that lots of people love. I first read Claire Keegan about 15 years ago when her short story collection Antarctica, oh my goodness, I can't speak. Her short story collection Antarctica came out. I remember being really intrigued by it because I think, as far as I remember, Faber paid a lot of money for this short story collection, and publishers don't pay loads of money for short story collections. So I just thought, what is happening here? What is so special about this writer that they really want to keep her? You know, I think they even signed her for a future potential novel which didn't come out for a long time, but she wrote Antarctica, then she wrote Walking in the Blue Fields, then she has since brought out several very short novels, and this one is about a young girl who's sent to stay on a neighbouring farm because her family have a new baby and they can't afford to look after her too, so she goes to stay with them for a little while. It's a very quiet, really gets under the skin, makes you cry, or at least made me cry kind of book, and I think very fondly on that. I haven't always got the hype about all of her books because they do get a lot of hype, but I loved her short stories when I read them 15 years ago, and I really loved Foster this time too. I am going to wrap up this video here because I can hear that I am needed. I will be back hopefully soon with a reading vlog where I'm reading some of my most anticipated books. I've been reading some great stuff in that video, so I'm excited to talk to you about those. And then I'm also going to be back with my favourite books of the year so far video, because again, I have lots of great books to talk to you about in that video as well. I would love to know the answers to any of these questions that I have been asked in this video. If you would like to share your answers in the comment section down below, go for it. If you've read any of the books that I've spoken about and would like to chat, again, comment down below, we can have a discussion. If you are new to my channel and you would like to subscribe, if you enjoyed this video, that would be nice. And also, if you enjoy my content and you would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, that would be very kind. Patreon is a place where you can support creators whose work you enjoy, and the support I receive over there allows me to keep creating free videos for everybody on here. There are a few extra things over there, like, as I mentioned, a book club, also some monthly bookish conundrums, some behind the scenes writing chats, things like that. Go check it out if that's your cup of tea. If it's not, don't worry about it. I hope you're all doing okay, and I'm sending lots of love to you all. Bye.